We recently moved into our new house, but the paint color was horrible and it was fairly old, and so we knew that repainting was a high priority before the winter came. And so I was debating doing it myself, DIY style, or else hiring somebody out. And ultimately, I decided to DIY it. And these are some of the things that I learned along the way, as well as how I managed to save around $6,000 by doing it myself. So hopefully some of these tips will help you out if you're diving into it yourself. And also I will give you a little cost breakdown as to how much it costed me and whether or not I would consider doing it again. So once I dove into this project, one of the first big lessons that I learned was that the preparation process was definitely the biggest time suck, and that doesn't just mean the masking before you paint. That was actually the smaller part of the prep process. The thing that took the most time was all of the repairs, the cleanup, and the caulking before we even got to masking. I ended up having to repair some trim pieces, some fascia, and a little bit of siding around the house that had just been weathered over the years or taken a beating from the sprinklers. And so that was a time-consuming process that took me a few days, and then my father-in-law helped me re-caulk the entire house. So we caulked all of the gaps, all of the cracks, the nail holes, and just made sure that everything was sealed up well. And then I also took the time to pressure wash the house. Originally, I had read that that was a good idea, but I didn't have a pressure washer, so I was debating skipping it and just using a hose. But I was able to get one from a friend that ended up making a huge difference, because through the process of pressure washing, I realized how much dirt was coming off that without the pressure probably wouldn't have, and I'm sure that would have caused issues with paint adhesion and just shortened the lifespan of the repaint. So I'm glad I was able to pressure wash it, and I would definitely recommend doing that if you're able to. So while this prep process took a long time, I definitely realized that it probably helped save time on the painting and saved a little bit of money on paint itself. And so it's worth it, and it definitely just makes things look better. And when it comes to the masking part, I didn't realize that it doesn't have to be a very precise process. For us, we were spraying the body of the house, and then we were going to hand paint and cut in all of the trim. And so when it came to masking, that masking tape could just go anywhere on the trim, so long as it kept all of the paint off of the vinyl windows and the glass and the doors. We were good to go, because it was going to get ripped off before we cut in the actual trim. So it didn't take as long as I had expected. And then when it comes to picking out a paint color, I learned a couple of different things. One, if you're trying to match an old color that you already have, but you don't know what color it is, or it's just faded over time, you can take a sample, so just a chunk of wood or anything with that paint on it, into Lowe's, and they can use a computer to scan it and figure out exactly what the color is. And then once you've got that information, you can actually have them store it in their system on your account, so that in the future, if you're needing to get some touch-up paint or whatever it is, they already have that information there. And so I've done that a lot recently for little projects, and that way storing paint and all the codes isn't as critical for the future. And while we're on the topic of picking paint, one of the things that I learned was the price difference between a mid-level and a higher level paint is actually not as significant as I had thought. I was told by a local painter to check out the higher end paint just because it had higher UV resistance and would probably last a bit longer, and so I did. And for our size of house, it was only about $150 difference, which to me is not that significant when I think about the ability to avoid having to do this all again for a few extra years. And I also realized in this process that taking the downspouts off was definitely worth it, because it gave me the ability to paint behind them and make sure there was good coverage, as well as making painting the downspouts easier. Once the downspouts are down, you also have the ability to remove the gutters if they are damaged or you need to paint behind them, which I needed to in a couple of spots. And I even had to rebuild one of the gutters, which wasn't as hard as I thought. I just picked up some pieces from Lowe's, assembled it, and hung it up. And it only took me about an hour and a half to do a section with a couple of corners. And while it was a little bit tedious to hang it, I got the slope right, got it all sealed up, and it should last a long time, I'm hoping. Now, onto the painting process itself. So the first thing that I learned was that you need to check your weather for temperature and for wind speed. I knew the temperature thing because I had heard that you can't paint if if it's below 55 degrees Fahrenheit, but I didn't think about wind speed. And if you're spraying the paint like we were, it can definitely have an impact. So it was moderately windy the day that we ended up painting the house, which caused a little bit of overspray, but fortunately it wasn't too much to manage. And it also caused some debris like leaves and things like that blowing around and getting stuck in the wet paint, which again, it wasn't too much to handle, but I did realize that in the future, if I have the choice, I'll definitely pick a day that has very, very low wind speed. Now, when it comes to applying the paint, originally I had considered the idea of just hand painting the whole house, but I found out that my father-in-law, who used to paint houses periodically in the summers with his dad, had a paint sprayer and was willing to help, and so we decided to go that route. But I also wanted to try out my smaller DIY paint sprayer that I've used in the past for smaller projects, just to see how it does on the house. And it did work, but I realized very quickly after switching over to the airless sprayer that it was significantly faster to use a professional airless sprayer, and it just made a huge difference. We ended up being able to paint the entire body of the house in around 5 or 6 hours, I think it was, which was significantly faster than it would have been with the smaller sprayer, or certainly doing it by hand. So if you have access to an airless sprayer, I definitely recommend it, or you can even go and rent them, and it's not that expensive. I think I saw one place rents them for around $100 a day, which is totally worth it because you will save a significant amount of time in the spraying process. The next thing that I learned is that it can be tedious, but it's totally worth it to take the time to focus on vulnerable areas to water or bugs. So for me, that was the bottom of siding edges between the foundation and the siding where it hangs down, because that's where bugs love to go. And then also the sprinklers tend to just spray in that area, and also rainwater will splash back up. So if it's not well painted down there on the bottom and even behind, it just leaves an area for water and bugs to get in and cause damage. And then down the road, you're going to have more work repairing and replacing siding. And then the same goes for the inside of the fascia where it hangs over. It's an awkward area to get into, but if you take the time to do it, again, it'll just prevent damage and make it so that down the road, you don't have as many repairs to do. And so I'm glad that I took the time to do that on this project. Okay, so now on to the cost of this project. For me, it costed around $1,000, and our house is a 1,500 square foot ranch. So this $1,000 was broken into about $700 for paint, which was 13 gallons of paint, 12 for the body and 1 for the trim. And then the remainder, the other $300, was for all of the prep materials. So the caulk for the entire house, some replacement trim and fascia boards and nails, as well as some painting supplies and masking supplies. So overall about $1,000, which was around $6,000 less than a quote that I got from a local contractor for what they estimated it would cost. So the cost was way lower to do it myself, but there was a lot of time involved, and while I didn't track it specifically, and I did get some help from a friend and my father-in-law, I think it probably took around 50 to 60 man hours worth of time. So if you're doing it by yourself and you're doing long days, you could probably do it in a week. But if you have some help, it could go a lot quicker. And I think that if I am needing to do this again and I have the time in my calendar, I will. I think it's a great way to save a little bit of money, and you can make sure that the job is done how you want it to. You can be aware of the condition of the outside of your house and make sure everything is just squared away so that your house will last a long time. So hopefully this was useful. I'll link everything down in the description, and then if you have any additional tips, please leave them in the comments, because I am obviously a novice and I'm sure there are lots of other good tips out there that you can share and help with people. Thanks for watching.